Liebe Frau Henschke, lieber Herr Schiller, liebe Teilnehmerinnen und Teilnehmer, liebe Podiumsgäste. Ich freue mich sehr, heute bei Ihnen zu sein und freue mich auch auf die Diskussionen gleich mit den vielen Teilnehmerinnen, die sich jetzt schon zugeschaltet haben. Das ist tatsächlich eine beachtliche Anzahl und das finde ich auch großartig, dass Sie sich Montagmorgen die Zeit nehmen für diese wichtigen Debatten. Ja, wenn man die letzten Schlagzeilen der letzten Wochen sich anschaut aus Israel, dann sieht man natürlich sehr eindeutig, dass dieses Land in einem sehr starken Veränderungsprozess ist. Das ist das Land, mit dem sich die Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung nicht nur über ihr renommiertes Studienreisenprogramm befasst, sondern auch in vielen anderen Bereichen beschäftigen wir uns natürlich mit Israel und sind auch deswegen mit dem Herzen dabei bei jeder politischen Entwicklung, die sich dort ergibt. Es stehen Fragen im Raum, die uns in anderen Kontexten auch aus Deutschland und Europa bekannt vorkommen. Was hält die Gesellschaft eigentlich zusammen? Was verbindet und was teilt die Gesellschaft in einer krisenhaften Zeit? Ich freue mich deshalb, Sie alle hier heute begrüßen zu dürfen und freue mich auch darauf, mit Ihnen gemeinsam diese Problematik zu erörtern. Wir möchten heute verstehen, was es aktuell damit auf sich hat, dass eine Regierung aus 8 komplett unterschiedlichen Parteien Benjamin Netanyahu im Amt in Jerusalem abgelöst hat. Wir möchten nachfragen, wie die arabisch-palästinensischen Bürgerinnen und Bürger Israels auf die politische Gemengelage blicken. Und last but not least wollen wir versuchen, interne und externe Konfliktlagen zu beleuchten, die aktuell vor Ort von Bedeutung sind. Warum wir dies tun? Weil es der BPB ein Anliegen ist, dazu beizutragen, die Komplexität, Widersprüche und Vielschichtigkeit Israels als Land und als Gesellschaft zu vermitteln. Und weil aus unserer Sicht dafür möglichst verschiedene Communities, wie unter anderem die arabisch-palästinensische, gehört werden müssen. Und weil wir natürlich auch glauben, dass Differenzierung und genaues Nachfragen dann wichtig sind, wenn in polarisierten Debatten nur noch die lauten und zum Teil hasserfüllten Stimmen zu hören sind. Im Programm unseres Thementags wollen wir mit dem nun folgenden Podium über das Big Picture sprechen, die Entwicklungen, die gesellschaftlichen Zusammenhalt aktuell in Israel bedingen. Heute Nachmittag ab 14:30 Uhr dann widmen wir uns der NGO-Praxis. Was genau kann man tun, damit in einer brüchigen Gemengelage Menschen mit unterschiedlichen ethnischen, religiösen, ideologischen oder sozialen Hintergründen gemeinsam aktiv werden. Schließlich haben wir am späten Nachmittag ehemalige Teilnehmende unseres Studienreiseprogramms eingeladen, sich mit 5 Persönlichkeiten auszutauschen, die alle auf ihre Art Brücken bauen und gerne diskutieren. Gerne möchte ich Sie zum Schluss noch darauf hinweisen, dass Ihnen für diese Podiumsdiskussion eine Vollverdolmetschung, genau, auf Deutsch zur Verfügung steht, da das Gespräch auf Englisch stattfinden wird. Klicken Sie dafür einfach unter dem Bild auf das Weltkugelsymbol und wählen Sie den deutschen Kanal aus. Ja, dear Professor Tamar Hermann, dear Maisam, Juni, dear Yair Ettinger, in the name of BPB, the Federal Agency for Civic Education, I am happy and honored to welcome you to this panel. We are glad that you have taken the time to dig deeper into the many questions of cohesion in society in Israel. And of course, we are excited about your thoughts. Thank you very much for being with us. Liebe Frau Henschke, auch Sie begrüße ich nochmal sehr herzlich. Vielen Dank, dass Sie heute die Moderation übernehmen und damit übergebe ich den Staffelstab an Sie weiter.
Liebe Frau Josef, ganz herzlichen Dank für die Einführung und für die schöne Veranstaltung. Ich beginne noch einmal kurz mit einem deutschen Willkommen für unsere Teilnehmenden, bevor wir gleich ins Englische wechseln. Und möchte noch einmal ganz kurz das Panel erklären. Wir fangen jetzt gleich an mit der Diskussion, bei der die Teilnehmenden oder beziehungsweise unsere Gäste ihre Hauptthesen präsentieren werden. Darüber diskutieren wir und Sie haben die ganze Zeit die Möglichkeit, uns Fragen zu schicken über die Q&A-Funktion. Wenn ich das richtig verstehe, ist noch die Handhebefunktion angeklickt. Wir würden es aber wirklich bevorzugen, wenn Sie einfach ausschließlich die Q&A-Funktion nutzen. Das macht es uns einfach einfacher, die Fragen zu sammeln. Schicken Sie die gern während der 30 bis 45 Minuten, die wir gleich diskutieren, und am Ende der Diskussion widmen wir uns dann Ihren Fragen. Insgesamt ist es ein bisschen so, stellen wir uns vor, wir sind auf einer digitalen Studienreise und wie Frau Yusuf ja schon sagte, geht das ganze Programm heute den ganzen Tag über, und das ist jetzt ein bisschen der Start in den Tag mit einer inhaltlichen Diskussion. So if everything fine, I would switch now into English and start the event, right? Yair, Maisam, and I think Tamar is going. Tamar, you can, if you want, you can go unmute yourself so we can go into the discussion. But first of all, I welcome all of you to the BPP panel discussion. We translated it into Israeli society in transition, players and perspectives. As some of our attendees maybe or might remember, the last BPP online event was right after the last Knesset elections in March. Since then, many things happened here in Israel. We saw the escalation with Gaza. We saw the clashes between Jewish Israelis and Arab Israelis. And we have a new government here in Israel with 8 parties in the coalition. So now it's about time, it's a good time to focus on the situation here in Israel and to discuss what are the dividing factors and what is keeping society or societies here together. As I already mentioned, we will have time for the questions of the audience at the end. All the attendees are able to use the Q&A function to ask the questions and to send us the questions, and we will collect them. My name is Steffi Henschke. I'm a German reporter based here in Tel Aviv, in Jaffa. And I'm really happy and feel very honored to welcome our guests. Professor Tamar Hermann. Tamar is a leading expert on Israel's democracy. She's a professor of political science and working for the Israel Democracy Institute, focusing on the public opinion here in Israel. So if we want to know what Israelis thinking about the political situation, we need to talk to Tamar. Thank you very much for being with us today. I'm also happy and feel very honored to welcome Maisam. There she is. Perfect. Maisam Jaljuli. Maisam is the co-chair of Suche, the organization for the advancement of the civil equality in Israel. Maisam, you're a social scientist. You're an activist for women's rights. You're fighting against the Israeli occupation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and you're active in Standing Together. So we're really happy to have you and have your perspective here in this discussion today. And last but not least, Yair Ettinger. Yair is a journalist and responsible for religious affairs for the Israeli TV channel Kan 11. He's also active in the Israeli Democracy Institute, and I think you worked about 20 years for the Haaretz. And back then, this is what we talked about in the beginning, I think, or in a phone call we had yesterday. Back then, it was not that common that you would talk really about religious issues here in Israel. And nowadays, you told me yesterday, it's a front page thing. So we will go into this. Thank you very much, Yair, for being here. I start now with the questions. Tamar, I would start with a question for you. To wrap up a little bit the situation here in Israel. We had now a 2 years political crisis here in Israel. We saw 1 year long protests against Benjamin Netanyahu. We had the escalation in May. And now there is this new government. It's the most diverse coalition Israel has ever seen. And there are a lot of people saying there's only one thing that is keeping what is kind of the glue between all these 8 parties, and that's that they're all against Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi, as you call them here in Israel. So let's look at the aspect in dividing Israel. Tamar, is it really that simple? Is it only pro and anti-Bibi? That's okay. We wait a minute because we had no sound check. Tamar was in another discussion in the morning. So let's, yeah, I can hear you. Lock. Maybe you take off your headphones for a second. Sometimes there is a problem with the headphones. Yeah. No?
So maybe you go to another panelist and we will see.
You're here.
Oh, no, you're good.
You. You're good. Tamar?
Do you hear me?
Can.
Okay. So Israel is always in transition. It is a very dynamic society facing internal and external challenges almost constantly. And indeed, if you look at most years, you'll find some security crisis, some economic crisis, some domestic crisis between one and two from the different segments or sectors of Israeli society. And as one songwriter put it in the past, we always have either a festival or a scandal. So for us, from our perspective, this year was indeed quite hectic, but not extremely hectic. And right now it seems that we indeed have a new government, which was created at the beginning by an anti-Netanyahu, I would say, position, but it has more than that. It is more than that because the idea was first let Bibi or Netanyahu leave his office and later to create a new atmosphere or climate in the country, a climate in which ministers, surprisingly enough, are doing their jobs, a situation in which the prime minister is mostly, I would say, primus inter pares, which means he's almost on an equal footing with an even in a lower footing than some members of his government, no longer a kind of an autocratic, if you wish, hierarchical construct in which the prime minister is almost omnipotent and can do whatever he wants. So a change in the practices, but also in the cognitive state of the affair was one of the most important issues in creating this government. We did have government, in Israel, always the government is bigger than numerically necessary. We always had large governments with the idea of having as many as possible representative of major sectors in Israeli society, with one exception. We didn't have an Arab party as a cornerstone of the government. We had them during Rabin's time as a safety net, but not as a full-fledged partner to the coalition. And this is a major change in the Israeli landscape. Now, the question is, will they really be given the option of participating in real decision-making processes. Because when we asked Israelis in the past, are they willing to have an Arab party in the coalition, we got about 60% who said no. And over the last year, when Benjamin Netanyahu actually gave some green light of having the same Mansour Abbas in his next government, the opposition to having an Arab party in the government declined to somewhere around 50%. But now this is reality. And as this is the first time it happened, this is a precedent that will most probably outlive this government. Now, we didn't experience yet a case in which the Arab partners to the coalition had to make decisions regarding, for example, launching a military campaign against their brothers over the borders in Gaza mainly, and we don't know how this will be worked out, but as there is only one party that for sure will cross the threshold in a next election sometimes, and this is Yair Ettinger, because we don't know whether Yamina will cross the threshold, Mansour Abbas and others. Sorry, the vested interest of each party to keep on going within this government is very high. And this apparently will be a major motivation for them to make compromises, even on issues that are very important for them, because they might find themselves out of government at all if this government will fall and new elections will be called upon. So what I'm saying, we have a new situation by which we have an Arab partner to the coalition. We have a diverse government, but we had diverse governments in the past. And it seems that this government managed to cross quite successfully some initial challenges, like the flag march immediately after it was announced in Jerusalem. And right now, negotiations with Hamas are apparently progressing. So I'm rather optimistic that at least for 1 or 2 years, this government will be able to continue.
Thank you, Tamar. I saw Maisam, you're already nodding and making some notes. I'm also happy to have you here with us, and I will continue with my second question for you. I think 21% now, or around about 9.3 million Israelis belong to the Arab-Palestinian minority or Arab minority. We see Palestinians with the Israeli citizenship, also Druze, Bedouins. And as Tamar now...
Druze and the Bedouin are Arab citizens.
No, because I just wanted to know the difference between Palestinians with the Israeli citizenship. It's all good. It's... and now we, you can also decide how we call it, because we spoke about it in the beginning. If we say Arab minority, Arab Israelis, Palestinians of Israel. So I just wanted to point out the difference. And now we have an Arab party that is a part of the government, and just right after the clashes in May. And there are a lot of people saying this is a huge sign of unity. Some of you maybe remember the picture, the photo showing Yair Lapid, Naftali Bennett, and Mansour Abbas sitting together, signing the agreement, signing the coalition. So, Maisam, tell me, what do you think, and what is the Arab Israeli minority community thinking about this new government?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I'm so happy to be here with you. No, my comment was, you know, when you said the Druze and Bedouins, and I say that the Druze and Bedouins are also Arabs and Palestinian Israeli citizens. This is what I meant. And, you know, I think that this is one of the problems that we had as a minority in Israel, because Israel is not recognizing us as being a national minority. It's all the time from, you know, establishing Israel 73 years ago, they always wanted to divide us to communities and to clans and, you know, Christian, Muslims, Druzi, Bedouins. This is something unnatural, and till now there is no understanding that we are a part of a national minority, a Palestinian minority, which have the Israeli citizenship. So this is one of the challenges that also we all have to deal with. You know, I think the main question here is, I don't think that we are talking about unity. I think talking about unity, regardless the new government, is, you know, high words that we can exaggerate when we talk about unity. There is a coalition. This coalition, this government couldn't have been establishing without Ram, without, you know, an Arab Islamic party. And I think this is part of the political game. Unfortunately, the one who, as Tamar said, the one who gave the green line, you know, or the for having a coalition with Ram was Netanyahu. You know, while I was and others were expecting that this coalition will be a natural coalition between the left Zionist and the center parties of Israel, and, you know, the parties that represent the Palestinian minority in Israel. But this is the situation. I think that in Israel, the ones who really draw the lines are the right and not the left. And this is also a challenge that the left had to deal with in the future, not to be, you know, to have their own ideology being in the front and not to follow the right parties, the right-wing parties. I think that the question is, do we believe in Israeli democratic as Palestinian minority in Israel or not? The last election showed that there is no trust between the Arabs, the Palestinian Israeli citizens, and the establishment. And because of the turnout, only 45% of Palestinian Israeli went to vote. And that means a lot. That means that we have no, or the Arab citizens, the Palestinian citizens have no trust in Israeli democracy. They choose not to vote because they had no hope of changing the reality in Israel. They choose to stay home, not because they don't want to participate, but it was because that they felt that, you know, their votes will not matter. Their votes will not change the reality. And, you know, it's very interesting to wait and see what is this coalition going to do in the rates of the turnout in the next election. And I think that this is the examination of this government. Is this government really is willing to have this changing towards the Palestinian minority in Israel? Is this government will have action, a real action, or will stay, you know, in talking? Yes, we are going to change the situation. We are going to do something. So I think also this is the examination of Ram, you know, because all of the Palestinian minority is looking now at Ram and the achievements that Ram is going to have or not having. And I think, yes, we are all waiting to see what is happening, what will happen in the next 2 years in issues of civic equality and issues of economic development in the Palestinian minority. I know, and we all know, that this government is not going to do anything in issues of occupation and negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. And I feel pity for that, because I think one of the major, you know, I all the time say the elephant in the room is the occupation, and nobody seems, it seems that nobody wants to deal with this elephant in the room. We have clashes every 4 or 3 years. People remember that there is a problem, and then we totally forget about it till the next war or the next clash. So yes, I think that we are in a period that everything is unclear and we are waiting to see what will happen.
Thank you, Maisam. Before we dig in deeper into what you just said and also what Tamar said, I'm also happy to welcome Yair Ettinger. Yair, I just want to continue wrapping up some superlatives this new government is dealing with. It's the first time there is a prime minister wearing the kippah. I think it's the highest number of women in the government, 9 women, which is about a third, and a major thing here in Israel. And there's no ultra-Orthodox party in this government, and you can correct me, but it's the second time since the 70s.
Yeah, so more or less. There were
more or less
short periods where the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, were out of the government. Yeah. Very short periods. This is very unique in the last, I would say, generation.
Wow. So before we go into this, I think picking a little up what Tamar said, what does this new government mean for the religious status quo here in Israel?
Okay, so hi, Steffi, and I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me. If we're talking about religion and state, maybe let me start with just a few words. I think in order to understand the Israeli society and politics, you need to understand one concept that I think the one who stated it in the most challenging and interesting way was our president, President Rivlin, who is he's going to finish his time in the as president, but he had a very famous speech called the Tribes speech, and President Rivlin said that Israeli society is no longer a majority and a minority, wherever or whoever the minority is, Arabs or religious or Jews from who comes from European origin or from the Middle East. Israel is no longer a majority and a minority. Israel is a combination of 4 minorities. One of them would be the secular Israelis, secular Jewish Israelis, Arab Israelis, religious Zionist religious minority, and the ultra-Orthodox minority. Now, this government, this concept, by the way, it's really, we can talk about it all day, but this government is very unusual because the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, are out of the government. And the some of part of the Arab minority have, or the Arab minority have some kind of representation in the coalition, in the government. This is also very, very unusual. That what happens. Now, talking about religion and state became an issue in the Israeli politics, Israeli agenda. For decades, I would say, the main issue was what Maisam called the elephant in the room. The question of the occupation, the question, the fight between left and right. What should we do with the occupied territories? So the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not only a conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. It always has. It's also a conflict between Israelis. What should be done with the territories, with settlements, and etc. But let me tell you that in the last decade, there is a shift, there is a change. The change means that new elephants entered the room. And one of them, and one major elephant, is the elephant of religion and state. And when I'm talking about religion and state, there are 2 groups of subjects. One of them is the Haredi minority. The Haredi minority in Israel is very, very big. It's about, Tamar, correct me if I'm wrong, something like 11-12% of the Jewish population of Israel. And this is huge. This is over 1 million people of Israel. this minority is very unique. Is culturally, religiously, politically, everything in every aspect of life is very unique. Now, as you said, most of the time, Haredim were inside the coalition. They were also the kingmakers of the Israeli politics because they were bipartisan. They could go with the left and go with the right. But in the last 12 years, with Netanyahu, they became part of the Israeli power, part of the Israeli government. And the Haredi power, the ultra-Orthodox power is very big. And now they're out of the government. So the issues that we're talking about, if we're talking about religion and state is, first of all, the power or the autonomy of the Haredim. The autonomy means the way that the Israeli authority, Israeli government allows lots of freedom regarding of how do you educate your kids in schools. Do you teach them mathematics and English and science or not? The answer is not, if we're talking about Haredi boys. If you have certain budgets, welfare budgets for Haredim, and also one major question is the recruitment to the army. The Haredim, there is a historical decision made by David Ben-Gurion, our first prime minister, saying the Haredim they shouldn't go. They do not have to go to the army like every other Jewish Israeli. This is the question of the Haredi autonomy. The other question is the religiosity of Israel, of the public religion of Israel. How do you what is your attitude towards Shabbat, the day that you have to be the rest, yeah, not working, and the question of cinemas and the streets and supermarkets on Shabbat? It's a major question in Israel. Question of conversion. How do you get to be part of the Jewish people in Israel? And these questions, Steffi, we were talking yesterday, these questions used to be maybe 15 years ago, very minor, very, in the page 15 of the newspaper. But today, all these issues, the Haredi autonomy and the question of public religion or public Jewishness of the state of Israel is front page. And some people are going to vote, not all of them, maybe not even majority, but this is on the table. This is on the agenda, not only or even less and less the Palestinian questions and more civil, I would say, civil questions and religion and state issues. So this government, I'll conclude with that. This government is very unique because, as I said, the Haredim are out. This is, if we're looking at the demography of Israel, it's quite clear that the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, are about to come back to the government, to the next government, maybe the one after. Haredim are part of the Israeli landscape, very important part of the society. They're not going anywhere. And they have their own agenda. But this government is, as I said, very unique. Some people say this is the last chance for forming a government without Haredim. I mean, I don't know if you can, some people see it as a good thing, some people see it as a bad thing, but this is very, I would say, not natural government in that sense because of the Haredim, because the Haredim are so central. So the question is, you asked what is going to happen religion and state wise in this government. So Naftali Bennett, the head of the government, which is, as you said, he's a religious modern Orthodox. He wears kippah. This is the first time that this happened. His agenda is quite different, is in conflict with the agenda of the Haredim. Even though both of them are religious, both of them are Orthodox religious, they are clashing all day long. For the last 2 weeks, every day there is a clash between Haredim and religious Zionists. As I said, both of them represent two different tribes in the Israeli landscape. And Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, his partner, they're not saying they're going to make a big revolution in terms of religion and state. What they are doing is bringing a little bit of competition into the religion services of Israel. There is a chief rabbinate in Israel. I think Naftali Bennett is heading towards a little bit weakening this monopoly of chief rabbinate. Some services will be with competition to this authority, but if we're talking about, for instance, civil marriage is not allowed in Israel. If you are Jewish, you have to get married through the rabbinate. So this won't happen. I think during Naftali Bennett's time at the prime minister office, but other things, yes, minor things within I would say, the Jewish orthodoxy and the Haredim are very, very much threatened from his plans, although I think it's not going to be revolutionary.
Thank you very much. For now, thank you very much. We will dig deeper into all of this. I made some notes, so now we go a little to the discussion. And the first part I called diverse but not divided by nature, explaining dividing factors here in Israel, maybe also talking about the tribe thing and theory and how it's connected to the new government. I would like to start with a question for Tamar. It's now 11 in Israel, 11:30 almost, so we need to watch the time. I have 3 blocks, so 3 aspects. So Tamar, the first question for you. Yesterday, I think we spoke about it, and I would like to talk about a little bit the aspects of Jewishness versus democratic values. Because I read this new government, it's like a mishmash of ideologies, but it represents the Israeli population. So you have a lot of different aspects here, but there is one major thing that is separating maybe or dividing the Israelis. And as you said in another discussion, it's the aspect of Jewishness and democratic values. At mute.
For many years, the issue of democracy versus religion was a bit, I would say, opaque. It was unclear, and it was fine. It was constructive ambiguity. But since 1992, with 2 new basic laws, it was stated officially that Israel is both Jewish and democratic. Now the question is, can a state be both Jewish or ethnic and democratic? Because by stating that it's a nation state, immediately the nation, which in this case is ethnic, the Jewish nation, has some prominent status compared to non-Jews in Israel, and particularly the situation gets complicated because we have a national minority in Israel, which is very specific. It is not like a nation state in which you have people from all over that do not belong to the main ethnos and have no claims over the state. We have now a minority that is basically around 22%, but this includes children. When you talk only about eligible voters, it's about 16% that have claims over the state, and actually advocates and prefers another model, which is the model of state for all its citizens, right? The Jewish majority is by and large supportive of the prominence of the Jewishness as the main principle, but they diverse over the issue of should it be equal to the democratic aspect, or should it take precedence? And this is the issue that stands in the middle of what Yair Ettinger explained earlier on, because we see that the more orthodox or the more religious, Jewish religious the Israelis are, the more importance they put on the Jewishness of the country and the lesser importance they attribute to its democratic character. And when they are pushed with their back to the walls, they would say it's more important to be Jewish than it's to be democratic. Whereas on the left side and even the center of the political spectrum, people would say equal or more importance should be attributed to the democratic nature of the state. Theoretically, they could reside together. Why should one step over the toes of the other? But apparently, when it comes to reality, in certain cases, the state should make decision whether it is more democratic or more Jewish. And in recent years, the democratic leg was significantly shorter than the Jewish leg, and therefore there was no balance between the two. When we ask our respondents to which extent there is a balance, proper balance between the democratic aspect and the Jewish aspect, we constantly get answers from the ultra-Orthodox and the Orthodox, and even the traditionalists who are more Orthodox, that the democratic aspect is too strong. Whereas when we ask the less religious traditionalists and secular the same question, they say that the Jewish aspect is too strong. In other words, we could not find a panacea or a solution to this issue, and I'm afraid that we are not likely to see a solution that would be acceptable to everyone on this dilemma.
Thank you, Tamar. Maisam, I have another question for you. First of all, just to make something clear again, we all speak about the elephant in the room, and we will talk about the situation, why it's not part of the political agenda, talking about the occupation. But just to make one thing clear, this online panel here, just for our audience, it's about the inner Israel situation today. And another thing that was asked by the audience, Maisam, can you define again what you meant by minorities here in Israel and the Palestinian minority? And I think this question is important to maybe have a look at what are the dividing factors within the minority, within the community. I heard another podcast with you where you spoke about Ra'am and that it's an Islamic and religious party, and also the problem within the joint list. Just give us a little an overview. What is the situation in the community?
Okay, yeah. As Tamar said, we are about 22% of the population of Israel. We are Israelis. We are part of the Palestinian people. Actually, when Israel was established and the Nakba, in our narrative, the catastrophe had happened, the Palestinian people were divided. Some of them stayed in Israel and became Israeli citizens. And we grew up to be 22% of the Israelis. Yes, we are part of the Palestinian people. We are part of, the nationality which is called Palestinians. And also we are part of Israel. We are Israeli citizens. Meanwhile, the Israeli element is not strong enough because the country or the establishment had never accepted us as an equal citizens. And if I regard to the definition of the state as a Jewish definition, it's not only a religious definition, it's also a national definition. This state defines itself as a Jewish state. And, I have no problem with the definition. I have more problem with the practices of this definition. When you see that the practices means that you have a superior people who are the Jewish, and you have the inferior minority, which is the Palestinian. That makes the problem. And I think in the last few years, we had a lot of also laws that discriminate us. That's not only by, definition. Now there are laws like the nation state law, and recently the citizenship law, and also laws like the Kakal, the Jewish National Fund, that prevents Arabs from buying land because the land is belonging to Jews. I think all these laws actually are clear for us that they are kind of telling us as minority that you will never be equal, that you will never be a part of the whole Israeli society. And actually, ask any Jewish Israeli, who is Israeli? He will never include Arabs in this, in this definition. He will say Israeli means Jewish. And, I think that there is, even in all over the world, in German, when you say Israeli, and a lot of people will say Jewish, they don't think that, 20% of the population of Israel are not Jewish. So this is the reality of minority in Israel. We are like every minority. We are not homogenic. We have a lot of differences between us. And I think that every, not only minority, like Israeli Jews, you have the secular, you have the religious, you have in between, you have people from different backgrounds. And this is the same thing in Palestinian minority. We are divided to religious. We have Muslims, Christian, and Druze. We are also divided by, geographic location, the north, the center, the south, the Negev. We have Bedouins, we have people who live in the cities, we have people who live in the villages, and there is a lot of differences also between them. We have a very religious people, we have a secular people, and these differences, should be a part of the political sphere also. But Jewish Israelis see the Palestinian society in Israel as one society. They don't know the differences. They're not aware of the differences between, for example, as I said, Ram is a very Islamic right-wing party. Hadash is a very socialist party. And we have in between Balad, which is, a national party. So we have a lot of differences that nobody aware of them. And there is a lot of discussions, political discussion inside the Palestinian society inside Israel. And we have a lot of voices. There are a lot of voices nowadays said that we need to be integrating more and more in Israeli politics and like Ram. And we need also to be part of the making decisions, the patterns in Israel. It's not only Ram, it's also Hadash talks about that all the time. But what is the practice? Is the practice that I should go with every government, even right-wing government, or I should really be attended to the left-wing governments, because I am about like Hadash, which is a part of the left-wing parties, and it's very hard for Hadash to go with the right wing. So I think nowadays in Israeli society we have three major aspects. One aspect says that there is no democracy in Israel. I should not participate in the Israeli democracy because no matter what I do, this Israel is based on a Jewish superiority, and there is no place for Palestinians, so I will not participate. The other view says that we should, and this is the majority of the population, says that we should integrate, we should be more and more in making decision positions like the Haredi did, and this is the only way. And the third way says that, yes, we want to integrate, but we want to keep our nationality, dignity, our proud. We cannot go with every government. We cannot, be, a part of the Israeli establishment while the occupation is continuing. And so this is the three major, I think, views in the Palestinian society right now.
Thank you, Maisam. Yair, we're running a little bit out of time, so we go straight to the second part, which is about Netanyahu as a game changer and how influenced during the last 12 years the system and the societies here in Israel. And I think it's a good combination to ask you a question about the Haredi and also what is called the clashes in between religious groups. Maybe we can dig a little deeper. What are these kind of major conflict lines, and what was Netanyahu's impact on the situation within the religious communities here in Israel?
Okay, do you hear me well right now? I just, yeah, it's okay because the headphones are.
I think it's for the translator, for the dolmetsch, yes. For the translator, it's better to have the headphones. For me, yes. It's fine, but yes, that's the only thing. I'm sorry.
Okay, so sorry. Just a second.
We enjoy the view in Jerusalem on the Qatar.
Yes, I'm sorry. The room is not very representative, so I had to use. Okay, you hear me? Okay.
I hear you.
Okay, so first of all, if we're talking about the inside, the clashes between Orthodox Jews in Israel, so let me just connect to what Maisam just said. The first one is the cooperation with Israeli Arabs. And this is a revolution. I mean, this is the narrative of discrimination and the narrative of dealing with the occupation. That is a very big issue. That's the elephant in the room. But in some ways, this is the old news. This is the old news. Let me just say that what happens right now, that a right-wing prime minister cooperates with Israeli Arab Islamic activist as Mansour Abbas, this is a huge, huge thing. We have never seen that that kind of cooperation in Israel, that kind of, normalization of relationships between Jews and Arabs in Israeli politics, Israeli mainstream politics. This is a huge thing. And the decision made by, this is the news. Maisam, but the news is that the part of the Arab representations in the Knesset are refusing cooperating with the mainstream Israeli politics, as always been, but part of it are doing business with Naftali Bennett, and that is to say, our agenda is civilian. We're not going to solve the occupation. We are willing to leave. We want to leave. We want to live in the Negev. We want to live in the Galilee, and we want to gain power. And that's the political game. And this is revolution. I'm saying that again. And this is dramatic. And the drama goes also into the religious society, the religious.
Excuse me, Yair, I want to say something. All the surveys in the last years really showed that most of the Palestinian citizens in Israel want to be in, making decisions, positions, and I think Tamar will agree to that. I think,
but not the
population,
not the Knesset members, not the leadership. That's the difference between the leadership and the people. This goes in every survey. You see that people, the civilians want to have a different agenda, not only talking about the Palestinians. We want to live as equal citizens of the state of Israel, and not talking only about the national challenge. So this, you can copy this conflict or this discussion into the other tribe, the religious tribe or religious tribes of Israeli politics. And what happens right now, Naftali Bennett is a religious Zionist. He comes from the religious right wing of Israel. That's the movement who created the settlements. That's the movement that considered itself always as a minority inside Israel. And now it became the elite in many, many aspects of life in Israel.
this group of religious Zionists is splitted right now in many, many aspects of life, many aspects of ideological issues, such as how do you treat LGBT, how do you treat women, how do you treat the rabbinate, how do you treat the public religion of the state of Israel. And now that's a new thing. Also, could you cooperate, could you sit in one coalition with someone from the Islamic movement? And this one was way too much for some people in the same camp, and the camp is splitted right now between Naftali Bennett's camp, which says we are Israelis and we can cooperate not only with, we can cooperate with, by the way, with the left wing, with Meretz, with Nitzan Horowitz, with Merav Michaeli, with people whose agenda is so different, so far away ideologically from Yamina, from Naftali Bennett's party. And also we can cooperate with Arab Israelis. And that is all of this. It's brand new. This is it never happened. Maybe it happened before before 67, before the settlement movement, the Mafdal, the party of the religious Zionists, which was very small, and the agenda was not always small, by the way, sometimes big and small, but it was cooperating with the Labor Party before 67. It never happened after 67, and not this way. And so we are facing so many new things in Israel. One of them is that we have right-wing, this definitely 100% right-wing religious leader cooperating with someone from the Muslim Brotherhood, and saying, both of us, this is not my ideal partner. This is something that I was forced to do because of the political situation, but the people before me could never think about it. One word about Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu actually opened the door. Why? Because in the Israeli right, in the last few months, he said Ra'am, Mansour Abbas, is the legitimate partner in the government. After Netanyahu failed to do that, because part of the religious Zionist, the other part, the more conservative part, Bezalel Smotrich's part, said, never, we're not going to cooperate with an Arab. Naftali Bennett came and did the rebound. Okay, Netanyahu opened the door. I'm entering the door, me and my partner, Mansour Abbas. And this is all new.
Thank you, Yair. Thank you, all of you. I'm a reporter mainly, so I enjoy listening to you and making notes. I could continue the discussion for hours, but we don't have that much time, unfortunately, and we're running out of time. So if we go into the last aspect of this discussion, I called it agree to not agree, or we all agree that there's not one agreement. I would ask Tamar another question. And also focusing maybe on the future aspects. If there are so many aspects nobody can agree on, what is bringing the Israelis together? What is keeping the Israeli society together? What are the major concerns? What are the major things they can agree on?
Well, would you ask what brings all Germans together? I mean, of course, we are citizens of a state. The state is dealing with a variety of issues. Some of them are more concerned to certain segments and are of less concern to others. But basically, it's sorry to say that it's a normal state. And its citizens are being brought together by the fact that they are citizens of the same country. And if rockets are sent from Gaza, they jeopardize me, Yair's, Maisam, and everyone else. And we may have different answers to how to deal with these challenges, but we are being challenged by the same issues. Of course, there is a big difference between the Jewish majority and the Arab minority in terms of their future aspirations, but this shouldn't interfere with the fact that we are, in fact, part of the same thing. And if you go to a conference and you see Israelis and Palestinians and others, Immediately, the Israeli and the Israeli Palestinians are together and the other are others. So this is a simple answer. We are citizens of the same country.
But maybe if you dig a little deeper, what can this new government do? I mean, also to solve the current problems we spoke about. What options does the government have?
It will not deal with the issue of occupation, as was already mentioned, but it may do wonders in terms of closing the gaps between Israeli Jews and Israeli Palestinians. They can invest much in education, in health, in substructures, in more fairness in land ownerships, and so on and so forth. So I suppose that here there is plenty on the plate that can be done in order to strengthen this sense of belonging.
Maisam, you're agreeing on this?
I actually agree to Tamar, and I think what keeps us that, yes, we want to all, I think, want a better future. And I think that the daily life issues are, if not the same, they are very similar. We are dealing with the economic situation, with the health situation. We all want a better future for our children. And I think that we can find very common things in the daily life, of issues of the daily life, and we can also struggle together of issues of women's rights, and we are doing so, of issues of, economic development and employees and worker rights, and these things that we are doing in basis of a daily life. There is a lot to do in order to close the gaps, a lot to do. And I think that now the Palestinian Israeli citizens are, examining this government in these issues, in the daily life issues, especially. I think the very hot issue is the violence and crimes inside the Arab society in Israel. And this is the hot issue that we should deal with. And if the government can have the courage and deal with the crime organization and prevent them of doing what they are doing, so it will gain a lot of points, I think.
Yes, I just read, I think on the weekend there was the last incident. I think
family was killed. Yes.
Yes, a family was killed. And I think last year about 100 people were murdered. Like, it's an ongoing problem with
From the beginning of this year, we have about 52 people who were killed from the beginning of this year. So we are, half a year till now, and it's very dangerous situation. And I think that most of us as Palestinians inside Israel feel insecure because of this imperial violence and crimes.
Yes, and just to start up a little also the wrap up, Yair, you just spoke about this split and that it's a new thing that we spoke about revolution, and like a revolutionary thing that the right wing is like, or the religious, not the right wing, is kind of divided into two parts. And when I spoke with Tamar yesterday on the phone, I think you told me Israel is not becoming a religious state. Yair, you said, you spoke about that the Haredi will be back. And before we go into the discussion, and I just want to remind the audience to send us some questions. Maybe we can use this last moment to speak about the aspects, like which role will the religions play in the future of Israel?
Sorry, yes. So yes, the Haredim will be back, and this is Israel's society is so complex, and we are all the tribes, and you can look at the Israeli societies in many ways, many prisms, many ways of conceptualization, but people from different angles of life, nationality, religiosity, cultural aspects touch each other in Israel. It's a small country, and there is separation, even segregation, but there are many places that you touch each other in life. I'm in Jerusalem right now. That's only the background, but Jerusalem is a split city, but it's also a mixed city in many ways. In the hospitals, I just came out of East Jerusalem hospital because of a family member that had to be there. The hospitals are so mixed, so the combination between Israelis and Palestinians, Israeli Palestinians or Jerusalem Palestinians in Jerusalem is like it has never been that way. And I'm sorry, I apologize, but I'm a little bit optimistic. I lived outside of Israel for 2 years and came back to Jerusalem, and it's so complex and so fragile, and everything here is fragile. And you can light one match and everything will explode for some time. But also, good things are happening right now. Good things. I mean, people are cooperating. They understand. I think people are a little bit more mature in many ways to see that nobody's going away. Not Haredim, not Arabs, not Jews, not secular, not the right and the left, and we all have to live here, and really interesting things are happening. I mean, I'm not saying this is not an ideal. Nobody chose. Naftali Bennett didn't choose his partner right now. He said that, but at the end of the day, he does business with Israeli Arabs, and this goes to the politics, but also in the street. In Jerusalem street, you see also these new things, new places that people connect a little bit more than with each other. It's not ideal. It's nothing as maybe that people are dreaming about, but it's much more than in many states or societies in the world. This is very challenging. That we are divided with a national conflict within the Israeli society, as Maisam said, and I don't know. This is really. I'm curious to see where it's leading. What's going to be in 4 or 5 years? I think this is a shifting point of something.
Tamar, do you agree?
I strongly agree with Yair. I also see signs that make me more optimistic than I was, say, 6 months ago. There are many places, for example, for music in Jerusalem, where Jews and Arabs are spending time together, bars in Jaffa and whatever. Now, the question is, will we be able to translate these better relations on the personal and even group level to better relations between the citizens, the Palestinian citizens of Israel and the state of Israel? It is not necessarily going in the same trajectory, but on other levels, I think that we are going to see better options opened in the future.
Thank you very much. So far, we have one question regarding, I think, Ra'am. Maisam, maybe you can explain us a little bit, what is your perspective on this party? I heard you in another podcast talking about it, that it's as religious as Shas, which is an ultra-Orthodox party. Maybe you can explain it.
As you can see, I'm not one of the supporters of Ram. I'm secular. I'm a supporter of Hadash. I'm a part of Hadash. I'm a secular and a socialist. And but I think Ram represents, a huge amount of the Palestinian minority in Israel, and the ideology of Ram is ideology of a lot of people here, and I think Ram is very legitimate party in the political sphere. I have a lot of discussions with them because their agenda is a very Islamic agenda. They are part of the, Muslim Brotherhood. So they were created, under the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think that, they are very pragmatic. Actually, if we want to go to the history of Islamic Party, the Islamic Party was divided to two parts. One is the North Islamic, and one is the South Islamic. The South Islamic, from the beginning, wanted to participate in the political game in Israel, and the North Islamic is the opposite. They are all the time refuses to be a part of the Knesset, and they are more extremist in their ideology. But I think that, yes, in some way, they are so much like Shas, but they are so much different from Shas. Because they are in their ideology, they don't talk about only, a specific group that they are working. They are all the time claiming that they will work for all Arab citizens, also Christian, and they also tried to have a Christian candidate in the last election. They didn't succeed so much, but they have tried to do that. So I think this, it's very interesting to see what will happen in this party and how it will change because of entering the government. If this pragmatic views will continue, or will there be a clashback from their supporters and from the let's say the hard supporters of the Islamic Party? And this will be also for me very interesting. I cannot, I have no vision to see what will happen, but I think this is a huge challenge for the other parties, including Hadash, my party. And we need to have a good answer for these changes that is happening right now. Unfortunately, till now, we don't have this good answer.
Thank you very much. Tamar, I have one more question for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about the situation of the left wing here in Israel? I think like 60%, the people, Israelis consider themselves left wing or on the left side. I think 60% consider themselves on the right side, and you have some centrists, and then you have like
on the left, yeah.
5% or
12.
12. This number is going down, right?
It's steady for the last 7 years. Whereas in the 90s, it was like almost 50-50. There was no center. Now many of those who were in the past on the left moved to the center. Very few moved from the right to the center. The right is about 55 to 60%, center is about 1/3, and the rest are on the left or don't know. The left in Israel didn't bring any good news or new ideas in the last 20 years, but perhaps now with their participation in the coalition, maybe they will excel in practice. And if they will excel in practice, maybe they will be again legitimized as political actors, because for so many years they spent in the opposition, didn't take part in any decisions, and certainly they didn't renovate themselves ideologically. So they shoot themselves in the leg until the historical moment arrived in which they could be part of a coalition. If they are good, they will be apparently compensated for by the electorate. If they will be banned, they will be put to the garbage can of history. And when I'm saying left, I do not refer to Hadash. This is a different story altogether.
Thank you. So if I understood Maisam correctly, the majority of the Palestinians, Israelis supporting or going with Ram. The majority of the Jewish Israelis consider themselves, like 60% consider themselves on the right side, or right. Yair, so my last question is for you.
I want to explain the majority. Okay. The majority is not supporting Ram as a party. They are supporting participation in the political sphere and in making decisions. They are not supporting Ram as a party. So let's be clear about it.
Okay, good. That's good to clarify. Anyway, my last question is for Yair. You said the Haredim will be probably of the future government, and yet you said you're optimistic. So just you have the last word, what to be optimistic about in the future.
Well, not too optimistic, but cautious optimistic about the fact that, okay, let me go back to the Haredim. Just say that the Haredi community is bringing lots of challenges to the Israeli majority, as other minorities. If we are all minorities, every minority and its challenges to the other minorities. And the minority of the Haredim are very clear, very unique, talking about participation in the labor power, for men going out to work, education, the question of being part of the modern society, modern life. And Haredim, in definition, are separate. They want to separate themselves from the modern life. This is something that they are willing to fight and to pay prices for, to be part of, to be apart, to be not mixing with Israeli, not mixing with Zionism, if you will, not mixing with the modern society. But I'm not, regarding the Haredim, some things makes me optimistic because of change, because of notions of being a civilian, and some things make me pessimistic, very pessimistic regarding the Haredim. But I do know that if you want to look at the Israeli society, as Tamar said before, this is a society in transition. And I know that things that I think right now about all of these tribes, all of these minorities, all of the groups are going to change, because the agenda of the specific tribe, the specific community is changing. We are facing that in the Arab minority right now. We're facing that in the religious Zionist minority. And I think in 20 years, I don't know what will happen, but maybe we are going to face other agendas within the Haredi society. So I'm not afraid of anything. I think we can keep it together. The Israeli really weird and fragmented society, we're here. It's working. It's not collapsing. And I don't know, we are some kind of weird experiment that called the State of Israel, Israeli society. If we're not optimistic, I think we won't survive. And that's what we should do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Yair, for your last word. I think this is something we all can agree on. Tamar, Maisam, Yair, thank you so much for taking time. We still have like 55 people in the audience watching us. So I hope we did a good job. So far, thank you very much. And that's it for today. And let's stay optimistic.
Thank you, Steffi.
Bye-bye.